I'm Violet. I do art and sometimes voiceovers. In this case, I wanted to pull an Emma Artley, one of my favorite YouTubers, and do my very own revamp of one of my favorite running series, Monster High. No, not that one. We all know and love that one. This one. Now, before you click off and decide that I'm crazy for liking this, let me explain. So at the time of writing this script, I've only made it to the combo episodes of Season 1, Episode 12, Creepover Party / Creature Clash. And honestly, it's not that bad. Yeah, it's obviously made for kids, but that's what Monster High is for now. And that's okay. I like that kids nowadays have a show to teach them how to love themselves and others. And it's kind of cute. But I have my own issues besides sloppy writing and, frankly, bad character design. I got through the first few episodes and already had a new idea that wouldn't change the show too much. So here I am. Now, before I dive into the story, let me say that this show honestly isn't that bad. Instead of Draculaura or Frankie as the main character like usual, we get Claudine, which is a nice change of pace. She's always been one of my favorite characters other than Ghoulia, Scara, or Iris, but I have some issues with her characterization and honestly the characterization of most of the characters in the new show. First of all, Claudine isn't a fashion diva like usual, which just rubs me the wrong way. None of them are fashion divas, really, which is kind of weird since it's a fashion doll line. They did make her Afro-Latina, though, which is a cool representation. Speaking of rep, they have a whole episode where the monsters talk about their heritage. Draculaura is Mandarin on her mom's side, and Laguna is from Honduras. It's pretty neat. But back to Claudine. The plot basically goes with Claudine being a human for the first episode. She gets a special necklace of her missing moms from her dad. Claudine, the human, is obsessed with monsters and learning about them, which makes her an outcast in her peers and her society. She finds out that there's a high school for monsters in the woods by following this voice coming from her necklace, the Moonclaw. Anyways, she finds Monster High, and following the defeat of an Onokuma, thanks to her knowledge about monsters, she finds out she's a werewolf and is accepted into Monster High. Now, there's nothing inherently bad about this storyline. It's pretty good. She's half human, so she's unaccepted by both monsters and humans, as well as still carrying that nerdy, quirky archetype that's really popular nowadays in media. For example, Mirabelle, Wish, etc. However, I think I can do a better homage to the past while accepting the present-day media industry. I am no means a professional, and honestly, I'm just having fun, so don't assume I'm the best take on this. Honestly, make your own story if you have a better idea. For now, let's get into the meat of this. So when I started this idea, I didn't want to stray too much from what they have going. It's actually a pretty cool story and has some interesting plot points that I don't hate. On my first rewatch, I decided that the story needed a new character. Nothing wrong with Claudine being the main character for once, at all. I just felt like in the revamp, there needed to be someone new. Her name was originally Melanie, but I decided she'd be a siren character and I changed it to Melody. Yeah, I know it's cheesy, but it's no worse than Draculaura being the daughter of Dracula, right? Right. One thing almost all fans are upset about as well is Laguna's new look in this gen, and honestly, I don't hate her new look all that much, but what if it was even better? I'm no fashion designer, and I'll be honest here, I hated this design. Not that it was bad, but it didn't feel main character worthy for such a treasured franchise. So I scrapped Melody, and I had to come up with a new idea. I was faced with a choice. Either come up with a new main character like Melody and keep the story written into the original show, or rewrite an entirely new cast and keep the same story, or rewrite the story with just redesigned main characters of the old gen. So I decided not a new main character. It would just throw the whole thing off. So it's either a new cast or a new story. And I felt like a new story was the way to go. New characters wouldn't play on the nostalgia needed to revamp such a popular series, and honestly, it was just the safer route to keep people interested. This way, it's still Monster High, just a revamp, not a reboot. So I picked my main cast, Team Steam. Team Steam consists of Robecca, a steampunk-inspired robot, Venus McFlytrap, my favorite character, and Rochelle, who's a gargoyle from Scaris, as well as Cyclops, Ghoulia, and Henry Hunchback. Team Steam kinda has been the background B team in the books and sometimes in the shows or movies, and they've been a big part of the lore for Gens 1 and 2. Robecca would be the main character, seeing as how she's got the most extensive lore and honestly just a really cool story. I'm thinking it'll follow the original story, but we'll get to that later. For the overall style of the show, I wanted to keep the round, kid-friendly vibe they have going for Gen 3 while keeping that fashion part of Fashion Doll. Even though the style for animation is supposed to be simple, I feel like you can still incorporate some sort of fashion design. So I gave her a vested waistcoat with gear buttons, a crop jacket, and ruffled pants. Something to fit her steampunk era while still keeping a simple animatable design that can be easily sold with different fashionista fits. I wanted Robecca to be Desi, and I gave her wavy hair like the OG design. I feel like representation is a lot of what Monster High Gen 3 was going for, so why not have a Desi main character? It also just fits Robecca, I feel like. I gave her the classic blue hair and added some blue pops of color in the shoes and her vest, keeping the brown palette in the pants and jacket. I changed my mind on colors a few times, but settled on the blue hair, brown and blue clothes, and blue and brown eyes. I feel like this design is perfect for a kids show, but alludes to the OG Robecca just enough to keep that nostalgia and love for the character herself. Okay, moving on. Venus is my personal favorite character, but I didn't want that to overshadow her role as a supporting character, so she's a little less fleshed out story-wise. I think Venus is a kind soul, and that's why she's so politically active. She's always been an environment, punk kind of character, and I wanted to stick with that idea. I also like her fashion style in the new dolls and tried to include the hair and features she has now. Instead of fangs, however, I gave her a nose ring. I gave her a lot of piercings, actually. It just fits her vibe. I gave her locks and a studded belt as well. Again, it just fits the vibes. Anyway, here's Venus in all her redesigned glory. I think she looks stunning and is definitely my favorite one so far. Rochelle is probably one of my more subtly favorite characters. I kinda used to ship her with Deuce, long story, but let's talk about design. I made Rochelle a bit more realistic in body type, and I gave her a super stylish bob with her typical blue and pink streaks. I originally wanted Rochelle to have wings, but I'm gonna be so honest, I cannot draw wings, and they just didn't look good in my style. But she has them, in my version. Trust. I wanted to play around with textures and patterns for Rochelle because she is supposed to be from Scaris, the fashion capital in Monster High, and I wanted to keep it simple to animate like I did with the others while keeping it cute and stylish. And here she is, Rochelle Goyle. I love her. She is so super cute, and she definitely gives me that Paris fashion vibe. I'll probably design Sai, Gulia, and Henry later. I just really wanted my main three to be designed while I figured out the story. Speaking of the story, let's dive right in. Following Rebecca's original story, she was drafted in the year 1814 and built in the late 19th century by Robecca Steam. Elisabeth, another character from the G2, who was fated to be Queen of the Vampires, gave a special relic called the Vampire's Heart to Hezekiah, and he put it into Rebecca's core to keep it safe. The Vampire's Heart, for context, is an old vampire relic that can indicate who the next fated ruler of the Vamps is. It glows when it's near the next ruler, and it's extremely powerful in the vampire community as it can knock an evil ruler off the throne or something to a similar extent. Anyways, Robecca was invented to be a teenager, so she lived with her father, Hezekiah, for about 16 years, following him all around the world and helping him with his projects. At one point, notably, she visited Transylvania, where she was considered an outcast due to being artificially made and not a real monster. After settling in the United States of Scaramerica, that's the name that was greenlit, for real. After settling in the United States of Scaramerica, her father returned to Monster High as a teacher, but mysteriously disappeared in the catacombs. She was devastated and found solace in roller skating. She was the first female to acquire a career in Skulltimate Roller Maze, but when another team cheated at a game, it left her dismantled. She was rebuilt by Gulia and Frankie, and reacquired her status in the Skulltimate Roller Maze world. With her father still missing, she is determined to find him. This video is already way too long with all 3 redesigns and the first outline of the story, so I don't have quite enough time to do the full outline of the first episode yet, but I'll do that some other time if this blows up. The main point of the series is to follow Robecca and the crew in the search for her father, and at this point the vampire's heart story has already happened, so it's not that important to know going into the new show. Again, it's a revamp of G3, so not completely different from G2, but not a reboot either. And that's all I have for my revamp so far. If there's any suggestions, let me know, and I'll go from there, but I'm happy with any sort of criticism. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!